If hiring feels harder than it should, and you know that even small missteps carry big consequences, this episode will really resonate with you.
80% of candidates would choose work-life balance over higher pay. But in terms of the thing they value most is the flexibility to work from home.
Welcome to the Dee-Brief Show, the show for leaders who want to bring out the best in themselves and their teams and their communications. I'm Dee Clayton, your host. I'm a multi-award-winning executive coach and trainer, and today is all about juggling people decisions alongside everything else you're responsible for. Joining me in this episode is Claire Bond and Suzanne Sherriff from Bond Williams Professional Recruitment, and they work closely with organisations to improve how they interact, interview and onboard talent.
Quite a lot of clients are bringing candidates into the office full time now, so there's a real divide, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next couple of years as well.
In this episode, we're going to ask for their expert opinion on why hiring leaders feels harder than it ever has been before, and asking what gets overlooked when recruitment is just squeezed in alongside the day job.
At the moment, the time to hire has been stretched quite significantly, to be honest. You're looking at nearly 5 weeks to fill a role, which is a lot.
We're going to explore why hiring good people is more complex than it used to be, how candidate experience affects outcomes more than leaders realise, and how small process improvements can save time, cost, and frustration in the long run. So welcome to Claire and Suzanne. Hi Claire, tell us a little bit more about your role and what does Suzanne do as well?
Hi Dee. My role at Bond Williams, I mainly look after the marketing and the strategy for Bond Williams. My background started, Bond Williams has been going for 21 years.
Wow.
It's quite a long time, can't quite believe it ourselves sometimes. Back in 2001, we saw a gap in the market for a different type of agency that was a bit more people focused, less around KPIs, just really focusing on delivery, integrity, honesty, really having time to build relationships. Back then, it was just myself that initially started Bond Williams, and then it just literally grew from word of mouth and delivery, placing candidates that actually became clients. And that's kind of been our ethos kind of moving forward, really. And then Suzanne is one of my right-hand people who looks after everything that I used to do, really, in terms of client delivery.
I joined Bond Williams 15 years ago this year, actually. Prior to that, I've done recruitment, but more sort of specialist, like travel recruitment. I've been in London for a while, and then I moved down here, joined Bond Williams, and really look after the HR recruitment, the professional services, Office of Commercial. Started off doing temps for a long time, which I absolutely love, temps, the pace and what have you, and now broken into a bit of temp and perm. And it's all about relationships, building the relationships, just getting out and about really, and meeting and delivering, what we say we're going to do, we do with honesty and integrity.
So it's about understanding the candidates, isn't it? So that you can put them into the right roles. So
and clients as well. Definitely.
And the clients, so you understand like the gap that they need and the kind of fit, because I guess an ideal candidate for one client could not be an ideal candidate for another client, right? So
absolutely, and it all depends on the cultural fit, because a lot of people, certainly in the more specialist sort of areas, the skills are pretty much and experience remain the same, and that can be transferred into lots of different companies. But if culturally this person doesn't fit in, that a lot of the time can be more important than the skills.
Because they could learn the skills, can't they? So
absolutely.
When we were talking earlier, you were saying that the recruitment market's really tough at the moment because there's a lot maybe of history background behind that. What's going on in the recruitment market and why is it so tough at the moment?
Kind of called it the great hesitation. There seems to be, I think, generally there's quite a lot happening in the world, as we all pretty much know. And I think at the moment people are quite hesitant to move on to new roles because the market can be a little bit up and down at the moment. That said, I think it just seems that, everyone's hesitant. Candidates are hesitating to move on. Clients are hesitant to take people on because I just think people are in this kind of
sort of holding pattern
at the moment. They don't really know what's happening. National minimum wage has changed a lot. And with the government changing, taxes and what have you, I think it's just put people into a real period of not sure really which way to go, left or right or forward. And then what we're finding is even when people do push forward or clients do push forward, sometimes the speed in terms of hiring from start to finish can be quite drawn out, I think. And again, that has a bit of a reverse effect with candidates because obviously if they've chosen to move on, generally people want to get moving and want to get through the process. But I think everyone just seems a little bit unsure where the market is at the moment, and obviously the value in recruitment full stop, or whether they can get someone to do extra work to cover.
And there's a skills shortage as well, though, isn't there?
Yeah, there's huge skills shortage across the board, which is been brought about by a lot of things, really. Obviously, Brexit was a major issue. Obviously, unemployment rates are quite low. I think we're 4.8%. So although there are quite a few people in the market, the skills obviously are changing as well. So I think clients are realising that actually they can cross-train or they can upskill, because some of those skills aren't necessarily in the marketplace as well. So, or people aren't moving with those skills as well.
And then when I think somebody leaves, from what I've seen with my clients, even if somebody leaves, they may not want to recruit somebody straight away. They try and get everyone else to backfill, or they maybe do a different position or get somebody in temp. It's a difficult world out there. So when leaders are recruiting, let's say they are recruiting and they're not just asking everybody else to do the job, what are some of the typical mistakes, and how can you suggest that they avoid them?
I think one experience that we seem to be coming up against at the moment is a lot of people saying, employers are saying to us that they can't find the talent. But then when you speak to the candidates, they're sort of saying that they can't be seen. And I think a lot of it is, somewhere along the line, depending on what process you use, and obviously being recruiters, we can manage that from start to finish. But I think a lot of companies tend to go down, maybe put an advert out on LinkedIn, for example, and then they'll get a huge amount of responses. But if it's not being looked at properly by someone who is a recruiter or really, has got the time to do it, people are getting lost, almost a bit like in cyberspace. So it's a hard one, because when the clients are saying that they can't find the talent, we're having candidates saying to us, well, I've applied for that job because I think it's perfect, but no one's come back to me. My advice would be, if you're going to put a job out there, you need to have someone that becomes, recruitment is a full-time job. And to get the right person, you need to sit and really, sift through the CVs, give people responses, because that, unfortunately, if we're not giving those responses, that can give the client a bad reputation, and it has a knock-on effect. So, if you're going to go out and go to market and start looking, then really treat it, would be my advice, as a full-time role to find the talent that you want. And it will take time.
And I think the challenge as well is, say if AI are reading CVs, or an inexperienced recruiter is reading a CV, they're probably looking for keywords within those CVs. And I guess it comes with experience. So when we read a CV, we kind of probe the questions. So we really do know the candidates, and we know which companies use which kind of systems, and we know which companies are in which industries. So some of that is already known to us, but a computer wouldn't necessarily know that information, or an inexperienced recruiter wouldn't know that information, and they don't have the time to probe, which obviously we would, and then we'd write that up in a profile. And I think the other thing is really defining the role. So if you haven't, it's not necessarily recruit like for like, you just really need to sit down and think, actually, what do we want for this role? Do we really need these 10 things that we've requested, or do we actually only need 7 out of the 10 or 6 out of the 10? Because quite often that is actually enough, isn't it?
And also, we have the ability, we can look at a CV and say, maybe not right for this particular client, but then we know our clients well enough to think, oh, actually, but you could fit in here. So it's to be able to then get in contact and say, we've got somebody that we think could be really suitable for you, whether that be right now, but it's that proactive, trying to think. Whereas with AI, sometimes AI will just reject a candidate before it's even been seen by a human. From what I understand, it can't look, it doesn't know the client, basically, and it doesn't know the candidate. So it's filtering people out before, you've even had that human touch.
So when I was speaking to you earlier, you said about the 7 typical mistakes and how to avoid them. I'll just read them out, and then we can maybe go through those step by step. So one of the mistakes is not getting buy-in to defining a role. So we can talk about that quickly. And then the second one was about getting buy-in to budget. Then you talked about agreeing the process, experience interviews, candidate communications, onboarding, and regular check-ins. So let's go through those one by one, because I hadn't even thought of half of those. So number 1, you said about buying into defining the role. What does that mean? Is that about other people understanding the role you want? What does that mean?
So I think that's, first of all, defining the role and making sure everybody is on board. So whoever is interviewing is aware of actually what is needed. Because sometimes the people that are interviewing maybe have a job spec, but they don't really know the role. And also it's really, really important that they are very positive about the company, because that has a real impact. And if they're an experienced recruiters of interviewers as well. So maybe they talk instead of listen, or kind of vice versa, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's knowing exactly what you want from the start, so that when the candidate's in front of you, certainly from a recruitment perspective, again, we know if there's anything else maybe going on behind closed doors that we need to be aware of, but can obviously process that information, not overstepping any marks, but making sure that maybe, in the back of our minds, we know that this candidate could be prepared if there was to be a change quite quickly, and that does happen. But it's making sure that when the person comes in, that they know exactly what they're coming in for, and everyone's on the same page. Because unfortunately, if that's not right, we have people that walk out and go, "Oh, I went in for an interview and the job seems very different to what was on the job spec," or it could be that someone's interviewing that's maybe leaving, and again, how they perhaps do things compared to what maybe the company need moving forward. Always that clear. It can have quite a negative effect, so everybody needs to be really clear.
Brilliant. So it's about getting the candidate ready and prepared, and the interviewers ready and prepared. Brilliant.
And being clear on the salary as well, so just making sure that the salary is what kind of people are prepared to pay, and also that the salary is kind of benchmark as well within the sort of marketplace, because if it's not pitched right either, you're going to struggle to have candidates apply for the role, or if it's pitched wrong, candidates are not going to accept the role, which is just a bit of a waste of time for obviously both parties, really.
Brilliant. So that's step 2, which is getting the budget. And then you've also mentioned to me before about getting buy-in to the budget. So you've agreed what the role is and the salary, but are you saying that sometimes we say that and then people change their mind? What's the buy-in to the budget bit about then?
I think with a lot of clients, they know what they want, or they tend to know what they want until they've met with us. But then when you sit down and discuss, obviously rates of pay, or, even how much, the final bill would be with us based on that, it then makes them a bit hesitant. But I think it's understanding what goes on behind closed doors. And I think sometimes it's just educating people in terms of, we're not going to sit here and just pick people off of job boards and then charge a fee. There's so much work that we do in the background, talking to people, connecting with people, tapping into passive clients and candidates, that's our role, and that's what we have access to. And a lot of clients wouldn't have that. So it's really understanding that for the budget that you've got, what you can get. We will search and search until we find the right person, and that could take a week, it could take 6 weeks. It all depends on the role.
But for a leader, they need to, if the leader's doing the recruitment, they need to then check internally, you're saying, don't they, for the...
Yeah, and if they're offering, if their salary range is, say, 40 to 60, then probably they need to be offering 40 to 60, not 30, because obviously that's just when kind of they lack a bit of credibility and they lose that momentum with the candidate as well.
Yeah,
and that does happen. It definitely does happen. But budgets can change internally as well, and we appreciate that. So it's just keeping everybody informed as the process is going on, really.
Yeah, and the other point I've got here from when we spoke earlier, you said about it was important for leaders, if they're doing their own recruitment, to agree the process with, if they're doing, leaders and HR are doing the recruitment internally, agreeing the process. Is there something in the process specifically that they need to agree, or just generally the process, Claire?
Yeah, generally the process from start to finish in terms of timeframes. And I think because candidates are so hard to find, if the time frame is too long, or sometimes necessarily a client might have started interviewing, but then the people are going to be on holiday that are doing the second interview. So it's actually just making sure that within that 4 weeks or however long it is, that everything is set from kind of interviews going out, people interviewing, feedback, availability, etc. So I think the average time to hire is between 4 and 5 weeks. So it's always make that your slot of everything needs to happen within that time. And top candidates are off the market within 10 to 11 days. So You're competing with other people that have really, really good processes. So just look at each individual stage and think, actually, where could we improve this? Or speak to us. I mean, it's quite easy to see sometimes, isn't it? So,
and also, you know, things happen, and if something has broken down, I don't know, if someone goes off poorly that's meant to be hired, just communicate, because we can manage that. I very much stick by no news is news. So actually, if you just let a candidate know that unfortunately something's happened, it could be another week. It's just keeping people updated and making sure, you know,
keeping them warm,
managing their expectations, really.
Yeah, that's so important. And they're so vulnerable at that time, aren't they? You know, it might be the only job that they've got on the positive that they're sort of waiting for. So, you know, you just think it's maybe as an internal recruiter, you just think it's another email you need to send or another phone call. You know, it's just a long line of things to do, isn't it? You probably don't realise there's an actual person the other side of that thinking, oh, am I got that job, and do I leave my current job? You know, there's all sorts of stress and worry that goes with that, I'm sure.
And also other people are competing for those candidates sometimes. So if you just keep them warm, then they'll still be engaged. Otherwise, they'll go off the boil as well. So.
Yeah, because there's not enough talent around anyway. So yeah, look after them well for many reasons. And then we've got a point here. Step number 4 or mistake number 4 is not having experienced interviewers or interviews. So tell us about the interview, like the actual process of the interview. So we've got there now, we've got the buy into the role, we've got the budget, we've agreed the process, but now we've got to the interview. Are there some tips and tricks we need to know there?
It depends on the roles that are being interviewed. I think sometimes naturally interviews can become quite drawn out and not always necessary. So I think, you know, once you've defined the role and what you're looking for, you need to make sure that the person that's interviewing, like we said, is 100% on board, but is asking the right questions that's relevant to the role, the company and the culture. And I think sometimes some of the roles, certainly when maybe competency-based interviews, personally, there's absolutely a time and a place for them. But I think my advice is that a lot of the time by sitting and just talking to somebody and going through their CV experience, you will get so much more from them as opposed to keeping it, you know, give me an example of this, when generally most people, certainly at more senior roles, you know, the CV, their LinkedIn page, that speaks for themselves. They've done it, but you want to find a bit more about them. So that would be making it a bit more of a conversation, but also letting the people really buy into you as well. Because I think sometimes, again, I'm using competency-based just as an example, but they can be quite robotic. And, you know, I think a lot of companies need to remember these people are interviewing you and your company just as much as you're interviewing them. So it needs to flow, probably would be mine, and people then come away with a much better experience.
Yeah, and I think what you're bringing to it, and this is, you know, I know you're a great brand because you think about the people. So I think people might think about recruitment as a bit of a process and just a task, but I love that you keep coming back to the people side. How are the candidates feeling? Who do they want to work for you? Are they going to feel motivated when they start work for you? They're going to feel like they want to recommend you or talk well about your company, you know, once you're in there. So I think that's good to always remember there's people involved. It's all about people, isn't it? So the next point you said is candidate communications. So I think we maybe have already covered that. Is there anything after the interview about candidate communications? Maybe tell us a little bit about saying no, because I guess saying yes is easy, right? Maybe just a couple of tips on how we handle the ones that didn't make it through, or the job's gone internally anyway. I mean, that drives me a bit crazy. Have you got any tips on that?
I think it's communication, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's just letting people know. I think the difficulty nowadays is people are so scared to say too much that they've almost kind of pulled it back so much they don't say anything. So
because they're scared of like getting accused of being biased in some direction. Yeah.
But absolutely, if the role's gone, let people know. If the role's still available, let people know. If you're interviewing internally, just communicate, and that just gives so much more, doesn't it? And still keep, even if people don't get the role, they still have a really positive impression. And same with interview feedback. Actually, if somebody's spent the time to be with you for an hour or two, I think the least kind of they deserve really is to get some feedback, because that's positive for them as well. They can learn from that and move forward. And if there's something they can change to get another role, I think that's a really good kind of way to get into, really.
I think that's it. And people need to remember these are human beings. They're going through a lot, changing jobs, looking for jobs, being made redundant. The stresses alone that come with that. They're human beings, and I always think treat people the way you'd want to be treated, and you can't forget that. And I think, you just need to be really upfront and honest, and it's all in the delivery. Still now, all these years on, I don't like giving people,
bad news.
No,
But
again, I think it's just how you deliver it, and if you can make it as positive as possible. Because for a lot of people, if you've spent good 2-4 hours with different companies, you have done really well to get to first, second, third interviews if it goes that far. So you need to almost look at the real positives and bring that out. And just hope that you can keep working with them and find them something else. But
and I've spent a long time working with potential candidates on their interview practice or their interview presentations, so I know how much time and energy has gone into the interview process. They might have spent hours and hours and hours preparing because often they have like a presentation in the interview, don't they, so that somebody might come to me and ask me for help with that, or just interview practice on, like you said, the competencies. So they spent a long time thinking about it. So is there it would be great to give them feedback, because that would be exactly in line with what we want to do, continually improve. Is there any feedback that they shouldn't give then, Claire? Because like you said about some people are a bit nervous about giving feedback because they don't want to say the wrong thing, get in trouble, blah, blah, blah. I mean, obviously don't say you're a woman, so you didn't get the job. But is there any other things that we shouldn't say if we're giving feedback?
I think it's just personal, isn't it? Obviously, you can't kind of criticize anything personally, so it just all has to be around the skills, or maybe just give them something positive to work on, I would say. Maybe they're in the marketplace, candidates are not getting a good impression of their brand, or because it's something historic. So those sorts of things we can pick up on for clients as well.
That's great. So that's a nice reason to have a sort of independent party. So on number 6 out of 7 of our typical mistakes, one of them is about not onboarding. You were telling me when we were talking before about once the interview's done and you've given somebody the job, you said they can sometimes not be onboarded as well as you would like, or we would like, or the candidate would like. Tell us a little bit more about that.
You tend to find that we have people that go in, and if they're not from day one, welcomed, shown around, toilets, restaurant, what have you, and just generally kind of mentored, if candidates are left almost alone to kind of figure it out for themselves, it just doesn't sit very well. They've invested a lot of time, the company's invested a lot of time, so you need to make sure that they're on board and they've got good training, they know who they can talk to. If there's anything that needs sort of, clarifying in terms of maybe team dynamics, that needs to be quite transparent from the beginning, because what we find sometimes is your clients will say to us, well, such and such maybe hasn't worked out after 8 weeks, but actually we keep in contact with our candidates, and when we're talking to them, a lot of it can be because they've not been onboarded properly. It's just really key to make sure that any training, any mentoring is really covered off, and it's consistently covered off, one-to-one.
Yeah, it does take time, doesn't it? Because I know a lot of managers are really busy and they think the induction's like another thing to do. Can't they just start working? But it's really important to invest that time up front, isn't it? So that they're successful.
And also ensuring like the offer letters and the contracts and everything is sent out and they're right, and they're sent out straight away when they should be, because that's another process that sometimes can fall down, can't it? Where people are busy because it's obviously a paperwork issue. So we just kind of help manage that as well sometimes.
Right. And then the final one was about regular check-ins. So they've started work, they've had their onboarding, and then just checking in over time that they're doing well rather than just leaving them to it, I suppose. And then eventually, as the new starter is bedding in, then that would go into the PDR system or whatever they do, won't it? But just a few more regular checkups before they fall into that sort of standard one-to-one system, I guess.
And sometimes it's silly things that could have been sorted out right at the beginning, isn't it? That from either the candidate side or the client side, they're just tiny little things that have kind of escalated that actually could have just been really resolved really quickly. So it's just keeping in touch, I think.
Brilliant. Okay, that's good. So that's our 7 steps. And now I can see why it is difficult. And somebody with a full-time job already would find recruitment an extra layer of stress. I know HR people do it all the time, don't they? But I can see how if the HR people have got other jobs to do as well, it can be a lot for them to do. As a leader, if I wanted to justify investing in a recruitment company, not just you, but for example, like you, any tips or tricks of how I can justify that? How can I get return on investment?
If HR, for example, are dealing with recruitment and HR are very different skill sets anyway.
That's changed over time, hasn't it, as well? I think recruitment used to fall under HR, but they're very different, I think, now in terms of the amount of time it takes.
Yeah. And, a HR person, if you're doing HR, you're doing HR. Recruitment is another role. And again, it's that time that it takes. Some roles you can put out an advert, for example, or we could speak to people. And we're talking, depends really on what kind of role it is. But say for quite a senior role that's quite specific in what they need, I could spend all day, a week working on one role just to make sure that, the search and selection's right, the people, the culture's right, and tapping into the right type of company, brand. And that's just, that's one role. So but that's what I do every day. But if you're trying to do another role, it can get a bit stuck. So I would always say it's the time that comes with it, really.
So probably being able to be more clear if you're looking for budget, to be able to say what time you think it is. So it's not just because I think as somebody who doesn't know the details would just say, well, you just stick an ad, just stick an ad out there, read a few CVs and blah, blah, blah. So it's about really being sensible with the time estimate.
I think it's very different. It's funny because I was looking historically at kind of when we first started and kind of back in the day, you'd put an advert in the Daily Echo kind of all those years ago. And then I used to record every single ad response. And you might get 10 or 12 back in the day. Well, now you could have 200, 300 responses. It's very, very different. And it's so easy for people to apply for a role, especially if they don't have to write a covering letter and all of those things. And that takes time. So it's very easy to see why people fall through the net or don't get any feedback. And if somebody's dealing with, 20, 30, 40 jobs, staying on top of that is hard. So something has to give, especially if they're doing another job as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And you also, I guess the other benefit of using a specialist is that you get to see the trends across the market, because however good I am, I'm still only going to see my world, aren't I? Whereas you're the experts in recruitment, so you can see trends across the market, but also candidates that maybe could come from, they might not have the experience that they've said they want, but you can see absolutely they're going to be brilliant in that company. You've done that before, I suppose, brought somebody else in, a complete, like a curveball candidate almost, isn't it?
Yeah, because culturally, again, it's getting to know your client and knowing the candidate. Yeah, a lot of the time, there's some people that you really could fit in. They'd fit into the company because you know their culture well enough. And then, that's our role, to speak to our clients that we've got the relationships and give them a reason as to this is why. And that happens quite a lot.
Especially because the trust we built with clients over the years as well. Back in the day, we never used to have to send CVs. They just trusted us, and it'd be like your best people interview. It's not quite the same as it used to be from that point of view, but that did happen a lot.
Wow.
And I think at the end of the day, if a role isn't filled, the business is losing money as well, or other people are kind of covering for those roles. So that brings its own challenges as well, from burnout, etc., from the team.
I think the thing is as well for us, because we've been recruiting for so long, certainly in sort of the local market, we know the candidates and we can sift out the candidates that are suitable. And I think, unfortunately, the clients don't know these candidates, and some, as you get in all walks of life, just aren't right for that company or that role. And sadly, as time goes on, it can be a very costly exercise when you get it wrong in terms of time, investment. Obviously, then if they do pass the probation, then the management of that goes on anyway. And that's the thing. We know the candidate market pretty well down here. So we know the red flags, I guess is the best way to say it. Whereas the clients wouldn't know that. So it's just specialists. We are specialists in our field, and we can also tap into a lot. We speak to candidates all the time, and they're not always necessarily looking for work. We have a lot that ring, just want a bit of advice, or just want to pass something by. They might be. I have candidates that call me that are interviewing for other companies, and just want some advice. So it's having those relationships, and which you wouldn't have not doing the job every day. So we just reduce the risk.
Yeah. And we do know senior candidates that come to us that say you might be putting them forward for a senior director role, but we know from the candidate that actually they don't want certain things. It's like, actually, this isn't the role for you then, because we do know this is going to escalate this role over time. They're like, oh no, I'm really wanting to take a back step. Well, this definitely isn't the right role, so I don't think we should take it any further. So there's a lot of that goes on behind the scenes as well, I think, isn't there?
Brilliant, thank you. Wow, we've covered so much in such a short time. Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think I should about helping leaders to get their recruitment process better?
I think training people to interview, I think it's a skill that you think people can automatically do by just reading questions, but I think interviewing well is a real art.
So training people to be an interviewer. Yeah,
and the listening, definitely. Obviously making sure people are really positive about your business, because if they're not positive about your business, you don't want to put them in front of candidates. And that does happen a lot. People are just sometimes a bit worn out, and they're not necessarily the best people to interview.
That was really interesting that you said earlier that the person who's leaving might be the person obviously is going to be the person interviewing, but what is their motivation like? And
sometimes it can work really well, and sometimes it can be really, really detrimental. And that's not necessarily the best person, I would say.
And also bear in mind, just because these people are very good at their roles doesn't necessarily mean that they're good at the interviewing and almost getting that across. They can be very good at one job that they do, but interviewing is a skill in itself. And it comes down to that whole sort of process. If you want candidates to come in, they need to feel just as relaxed and welcomed, I guess, and excited. They want to join your brand. They've invested a lot of time, so it's putting the time in, and maybe have one or two that will interview, so that people can keep it back on track. And just watch out for anyone that's maybe not as invested in the company anymore.
And the process, just look at every stage of the process and just see, is there anywhere else we can make some improvements? Because again, that will save you time in the long run.
So good to treat it as a process and continually improve. Brilliant. That's so good. Thanks, guys, for your help. Thank you very much. And thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you being here with us. Bye, Suzanne. Bye, Claire.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate you joining us. And a big thank you to my guests today, Claire and Suzanne from Bond Williams Professional Recruitment. If you'd like to listen to more shows, we've got one link now where you can find everything. And that is linktree/Dee Clayton, linktr.ee/Dee Clayton, and you'll find everything there, the Apple, the Spotify, the YouTube videos, whatever else you want to find, everything's there. So take a look, please. And if you found today's conversation really useful, then feel free to share it with a colleague or a friend and anyone else who's interested or involved in hiring or building teams. And join me next time for another practical conversation about leadership, communication, and what really makes the difference. Until then, keep bringing out the best in yourself, your teams, and your communications.